Sorry, sir, you are on mute.
I'm talking to Viren to ask him to join.
Yeah, he joined, just joined.
Dr. Sarin, you are on phone or you're talking to us? Because we can't make out. You're mute. If it is talking to us, you're mute.
No, I'm talking to Virendra Mishra. He's asking
Okay.
me a few questions.
Okay. Samir, can you put a message once again in the I cancel EB? I did put in the morning.
I will put. Virendra sir, very good evening.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Let me check if I can share a PPT or something which would make sense.
Yeah, that will be much better.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Zoom में थोड़ा challenge होता है PPT share करना, and particularly from Apple.
हाँ, Apple से जरा तकलीफ.
Is it visible?
Perfect.
Great. Yeah, I was just asking Dr. Sareen, like, if the participants are just doctors or we have some people who are not doctors.
The majority will be the doctors.
Okay.
Actually, Mr. Virendraji, the participants will not be visible to us. This is only the panelist link, and the participant list is different. So they will not be visible to us, but they are here. They can ask questions in the chat box, and Dr. Sareen can, keep a track of the chat box and get back to you in the end. Yeah.
Okay, that's what fantastic. So
another 4 minutes to go before we can actually, start off. 8:30 is the time, so 3 minutes to go. So maybe we can
just like when you're saying panelist means, when you say panelist means like there are more speakers. Am I supposed to speak for 50 minutes?
No. There are no more panelists. It's like our our executive board. We call them we send them the panelist link so that at least some people are visible to you, because this is going through our national organization, which is known as the Indian Academy of Pediatrics. We are all either pediatricians, most of us, and a few pediatric surgeons, like we have Dr. Sareen, and my husband happens to be a pediatric surgeon. But otherwise, it's mostly pediatricians. So, but the panelists are the one who would have got this link is just our executive board members. But yeah, there were a few. We are about 7 or 8 in the executive board. There were some who had shown their apologies for the same. So there'll be a few who will join in here. Excuse me.
Right, ma'am. Got that.
Yeah, so we had initially planned to have two speakers, but then we discussed between us that the topics that you all are going to cover are very important, and we have seldom discussed them. So it'll be nice that 1 hour you devote to child trafficking, another one session on Kara, maybe for an hour. And then we have also rolled in Amod Kanji, who will probably talk about, I asked him to speak on children who have conflict with law. And
अरे नमस्कार जी, नमस्कार वीरेंद्र जी, भाई साहब
Sir,
कैसे हो? जय हो,
कैसे हैं
जय
आप?
हो। मैं राजीव, कैसे हो? बहुत दिनों बाद दिख रहे हैं
Long
सर।
time.
कहाँ रहते हो भाई? कहाँ चले
Long
गए?
time, sir. अभी भोपाल में हूँ मैं.
अरे सर, आपका भोपाल ही आपका देश है, वहीं रहते हो। आज बहुत बड़ा काम हुआ IIC में। एक प्रोफेसर हैं डॉक्टर रेड्डी, वो उन्होंने एक बुक रिलीज करी है चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन एंड चाइल्ड राइट्स की, जिसमें अमोद कंद को बुलाया था, मुझे बुलाया था, तो मैं वहाँ गया हुआ था। तो आपको पता होगा कि वैसे योगेश इज आवर नेशनल सेक्रेटरी एंड उमा नायक इज आवर नेशनल चेयरपर्सन, बट एक इंडियन एकेडमी पीडियाट्रिक्स है जो हमारी पेरेंट बॉडी है, उसमें वी हैव गॉट ए ग्रांट टू ट्रेन डॉक्टर्स, 250 डॉक्टर्स टू प्रिवेंट वायलेंस अगेंस्ट चिल्ड्रन. So, I'm just appealing to my colleagues here in the iCancel group, Yogesh ji, Sameer bhai, while you all be there in that program, we still, I don't know when we are going to launch it, but we need candidates, the candidates who are going to be committed to this work, whom we can include in the master trainers program, which will do handholding like we did. But it'll include, sir, everything, including child physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. So I really need a support from everybody in the executive board of iCancel group. Anyway, sir, आप ट्रैफिकिंग के बॉस हैं, आपने बहुत अच्छा काम किया वहाँ पे, आपने किताबें भी लिखी हैं. I think योगेश जी, हमें इनकी किताब एक खरीद लेनी चाहिए.
नहीं, मेरे को इन्होंने गिफ्ट दी हुई है.
अरे कमाल है सर, मेरे को नहीं दिया.
Before we start the meeting, I must tell that I met Viren and his wife, both decorated IPS officers, where, at Dr. Rajiv Seth's place, over a grandeur kind of lunch with multi-cuisine lunch, So there I was introduced to this couple, very high profile couple,
अरे very, इनकी वाइफ भी बड़ी डिस्टिंग्विश्ड हैं. वो पहले तो वीडियोस वगैरह मूवीज बनाती थी गवर्नमेंट में, अभी भी गवर्नमेंट में ही होंगी मैम, या रिटायर हो गई हैं?
नहीं, अभी जो आपका पार्लियामेंट बना है, पार्लियामेंट के अंदर का जितना भी आर्ट एंड वो है, तो शी वाज द नोडल ऑफिसर फॉर दैट. शी इज विद मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ कल्चर राइट नाउ.
कमाल है यार, ये तो बहुत बड़ी चीज है. वो दिल्ली रहती हैं, आप भोपाल रहते हैं फिर?
हाँ, मैं अभी 2 साल पहले आया हूँ और तैयारी कर रहा हूँ वापस लौटने की.
अरे वाह, बच्चों का क्या होगा? बच्चे क्या है?
Both are there in Delhi, so.
चलो, good.
Sir, can we start, because this is a live thing? So can we start?
Yes, Sameer, you're right. Let's start. Sorry, we have enjoyed talking to Dr. Virendra.
Yeah,
So,
that's not an
Welcome,
issue.
sir.
Yeah. So very good evening and welcome to you all in today's one more webinar series of our iCancel group, and with the tagline that the child rights and child protection, what each medical professional needs to know. It's a really a good awareness webinar series what we have started this year under the presidential chairman action plan, we can say, of the iCancel group, Dr. Uma Nayak ma'am. And for this today we having a very eminent speaker, Dr. Virendra Mishra sir, IPS, having a very vast experience in the field on which he is going to talk today. I requesting our chairperson, Dr. Uma Nayak madam, to start the program with his words.
Sameer, I just came online to meet Virendra ji. I'm going to recuse myself from this meeting and join the general, maybe because of I'm standing for elections. I can't be on this. So apologies, sir. I'm just deleting myself from here. I'll go into the normal this thing. Thank you, sir.
The panelist, I mean, off the panelist. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so Rajiv, I must welcome you also before you move out. And I do welcome my dear colleagues as well as Mr. Virendra ji. And I have heard a lot about you from Dr. Sareen as well as Dr. Rajiv Sheth. We haven't had a chance to meet. I am based in Baroda, Gujarat. I am professor of pediatrics, so we have not had a chance to meet. And all high-profile people like Virendra ji, Sareen ji, and Rajiv ji live in Delhi, the high-profile city of India. So we are very fortunate to have all of them, have you here, and Sir Mishra Sahib. And we are just awaiting to listen to your experience about child trafficking. People in general, even pediatricians and doctors in general, don't know anything. We just believe that what is this? Kya hai? Yaar, child trafficking hota bhi hai kya? You know, so we are at that level, sir. So you can take us through your journey, and I'm very excited to listen to you. Over to Dr. Sareen for actual, to introduce the speaker.
Yeah, so he's a good friend, and Dr. Virendra Mishra is an IPS Indian Police Service officer of Madhya Pradesh cadre and currently posted at Police Headquarters, Bhopal, India. He's author of 7 books. Some of them are fiction and some of them non-fiction, but the book which really attracted me or took my attention was the book written Combating Human Trafficking Gaps in Policy and Law. Every time there is a major book fair in Pragati Maidan, I happen to definitely see this book lying on the counter, and I move on to the counter person and tell him that, look, he's my friend and I've got a copy with me in my house already. So the gentleman has been an international speaker. He just returned from UK speaking in House of Commons, I heard. He is a social change maker. He is an international expert on anti-human trafficking and founder of first anti-human trafficking lab in the country. The abbreviation is RACE, which expanded is research advocacy and capacity building against exploitation. And he was also director of NISD, National Institute of Social Defense, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India. And as of now, he is also advisor to National Commission for Women. I also remember very clearly that he was dealing with Kara, and he had all high-profile contacts like Menaka Gandhi and so forth, you know. And whenever we needed a meeting with such high-profile people, we would always use his good offices to put us across, and he will never say no. So with these words, I present you all Dr. Virendra Mishra, a good friend of mine.
So before sir starts, then Dr. Sareen, you should take an appointment to see the WCD minister, Smriti Irani, then, because Dr. Rajiv Sheth has been telling us to do some work with her. If that is possible, we'll be so thankful to Virendra ji as well as to Sareen sir.
I know, I have met her a couple of times. I can work out something for her.
Absolutely. Sure, sir. Sir, over to you, Virendra ji.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for the kind words and very generous introduction. And nice to meet 2 friends here. So, you know, the subject is, I mean, I would say that a little, like, you know, not a very happy, you know, doesn't make you happy when you go through this subject, child trafficking. But it is need of the hour, like everybody should know about it. So I'm grateful that, you know, I was invited to speak on this because I'm very passionate about this subject. So what we need to do, first thing, what we'll try to do is understand human trafficking. I will try to be brief and would like to invite more questions if it is possible, because, you know, to clear the doubts if at all they have in some. I remember Dr. Sareen was asking me, like, is 15 minutes too much for you to speak on human trafficking? So, like, child trafficking. And I was thinking, so you wanted to club two subjects first, the Kara thing, the adoption thing, and, human trafficking. Certainly adoption is going to be here. I'm going to discuss a bit about adoption here because it is part of, we can see adoption trafficking also happening here. But human trafficking is one thing which I run courses, 5 days courses in Tata Institute of Social Sciences, in Jindal Global University have taught this subject. So it's a very vast subject, but I will try to be concise and bring forth the major issues that everyone should know, and very briefly. The very first question that I asked Dr. Sareen was, who are the participants? As I have been told, one is the doctors, and second, I think even people from civil society organizations are also there. And even if they are not there, we have doctors, but every person has a dual role to play. One is the professional and the other is as a citizen of the country. So I think it is very important for us to understand beyond what, as a doctor, you have to play, the role that you have to play. You should understand the concept of human trafficking as well, because you never know it is happening. It may be happening just next door. So let us first understand what human trafficking is. Human trafficking is, believe me, it's an evolving subject. If you ask anyone, a common man, a layperson, like what human trafficking is, if at all they have heard about it, then they would say that human trafficking means sex trafficking. And sex trafficking, that too, they would think it is what happens in brothels, a girl being taken to brothels or otherwise escort services, as we talk about. So this is what is the general perception about human trafficking. And unfortunately, I would say that even the United Nations data would say that 70% of the trafficking happens in sex trafficking, which gradually people are realizing that this is not fact. There are different dimensions of human trafficking. Though I would limit yourself to child trafficking, but certainly it's going to go beyond child trafficking as well, because whatever trafficking happens of adults, for the same purpose, a child can also be trafficked. So first we need to understand what human trafficking is, because the concept of human trafficking is somehow misunderstood, as it is an evolving subject. To explain everyone, very briefly, this is a checklist. And I say even to the police officers when I train them, to all the, I divide the intervention, government interventionists as social justice system and the criminal justice system. And I tell even the social justice system people need to understand, and criminal justice system people also need to understand what human trafficking is. Globally, somehow, human trafficking has been perceived as the problem of police or the law enforcement agencies or the criminal justice system. This is truly, I would say that it is wrong. More, the social justice system has to play a role in combating human trafficking than the criminal justice system. We are not going to go very, in very detail about that, but let me explain you what human trafficking is. What I have given here is the checklist. We have divided the definition. That definition has been picked from Palermo Protocol of UN, which was given in way back in 2000. And the same was copied in section 370 of IPC. So this is what definition we have in our country right now. So what I have done is I have divided the definition into three actions. One is, what is the main action which is involved in human trafficking? It is very important for us to understand, then only we will be able to decipher what action will be considered as human trafficking and what is not going to be considered as human trafficking. So in action, suppose a person is there. Let us take it as let me explain you as a story. Like there is a person in some village. That person is vulnerable. some traffickers from other place go and somehow entice them and recruit them. Recruit is a technical term. Recruit doesn't mean like, literally they would be recruiting them. But when the person is taken into possession by the trafficker, that is called recruitment. So a victim is there in a village, a trafficker would come, take the victim into possession, and then transport them from one place to another. While transporting, there could be harboring. And at the final destination, they would be receiving of the person by someone. And then the person who is in their possession, the victim, is maintained continuously. So it is from recruitment up to maintaining of the person, and in between the person is transported, transferred, and received by a person and maintained. Now for recruitment, for a case to be a trafficking case, what are the means adopted for recruitment? It has to be either threat or force, or the person has to be deceived or some fraud has to be involved, or there is abuse of power or a position, or there is receiving of, of payment, that is like, buying of the person. And in case the person is adult, if these means are adopted for recruitment, then it becomes a case of human trafficking. But in case of children, like, if there is recruitment, then you need not have these means. I mean, there is need not, it is not mandatory for these means to be adopted for recruitment. So the consent of the child is null and void. And who is a child? Any person who is below age of 18 is a child. And what is the purpose? Any very important component of this definition is for what purpose the person is being recruited and maintained. That is for exploitation. So the exploitation could be for what purpose? The exploitation is for sex, or either for forced labor or organ transplant. Otherwise, there is a very generalized term used in the definition, slavery or anything akin to slavery. So this is very important for us to understand, that slavery or anything akin to slavery. So this gives you full ground that if there is that action is involved and the means is adopted, and if there is exploitation there, the element of exploitation, then a case can be registered under that slavery component. So this is what we have to understand. Now, let me explain you what is the difference between rape case and trafficking, just by using this, the same ANP model. In rape case, if you see, there won't be any recruitment or threat, or basically it would be threat, force. And most important thing is there is no maintaining of, the victim. If you see here, the maintaining of a person is not there of the victim. They're just the person is exploited, sexually exploited or sexually abused, we may use the right word, and they're sent. Normally, when we say exploitation here in trafficking cases, then it happens only if the person is maintained continuous, and exploitation is there on a regular basis. So this is give me a sense. Yeah. So this is what how it differentiates rape and trafficking for sex. For trafficking of sex, a person would be kidnapped and kept continuously and sexually exploited, as they do in brothels or in other places. Similarly, if you want to differentiate between a case of abduction and trafficking. So if you see in a case of abduction, there is recruitment. A person is picked. Recruitment is a person is picked. He's or she is transported from a place to another place, and then the person and the means used could be force or deception or anything. But again, there is no maintenance of that person, and there is, even if it is the person is maintained, there is no component of exploitation, because the person is just maintained for a very short period, and that too for ransom. But if at all the person is maintained for longer period, and there's the victim is exploited by the kidnapper, then it becomes a case of human trafficking. So this is what is important, to understand what is going to be a case of trafficking and what is going to be, registered under different sections of IPC. So this applies both for, for children as well as for the adults. So this is the checklist. If everyone knows if we just have this checklist with us, then we'll be able to differentiate between normal cases and the cases under Section 370, which is human trafficking cases. Now, again, let us understand, here, if you go by the definition, then definition talks about commercial sexual exploitation, forced labor, and organ transplant. These are the only three ways that is very categorically, or I would say that explicitly very given in the definition. But when we were doing research, we found that besides commercial sexual exploitation and forced labor, we coined a term called medical trafficking. I coined the term medical trafficking in my book. And the other two things that I have identified, which could become human trafficking, besides organ transplant and medical trafficking, is clinical drug trials and surrogacy. And this is very important for the doctors. So I will explain you, if you just put it in that same checklist, that's why I'm giving you the checklist. Like if you put it there, you will find that how surrogacy can become a human trafficking case and how clinical drug trial also can become a human trafficking case. And another type of trafficking is adoption trafficking. So how a case can become a trafficking even in adoption. So we'll discuss a little bit in detail later on. So let me give you what has happened in the definition is a very generalized term has been used. And when we use generalized terms, it does more harm than good. Like we have used the term commercial sexual exploitation. Let me explain you this term, commercial sexual exploitations. So what I have identified in a broader way is there could be around 6 types of commercial sexual exploitation. Like prostituted. Prostituted means if somebody is prostituted in brothels. Community-based sexual exploitation. Now, prostitute, everybody knows that when they are taken to brothel and exploited, so that becomes a case of human trafficking. Now, let us talk about community-based sexual exploitations. I don't know if you have ever heard about DNTs. Have you heard about DNTs, denotified tribes? There were few communities which by the Britishers were put under Criminal Tribes Act, 1871. So those communities like Bedia, Barchada, Nat, Kanjar, Sasi, these communities were notified as criminal tribes under 1871 Act by the Britishers for whatever reason. So after the independence in 1952, the government of India, they denotified these tribes and put these tribes into under Denotified Tribes Act. Though these denotified tribes, some have been put as categorized as scheduled castes, some have been categorized as scheduled tribes, and some have been categorized as OBC. Not all are tribes. But still there is a department in Government of India under Ministry of Social Justice which looks after denotified tribes. So in India, there are many tribes which are traditionally into intergenerational prostitution. For example, Bedia and Bachla community. And we have a huge community here in Madhya Pradesh as well. In Bedia Bachla community, a girl at the age of 13 and 14, soon after attaining this puberty, is prostituted by mothers or somebody from the family. Most of the children, many of the children, I would say that a big chunk of the children, won't be having identifiable biological father because they have been fathered by customs. So these children are prostituted by, and customarily and traditionally. So they are prostituted. If they are prostituted here, so this becomes a case of human trafficking because as per the definition, the consent of the child is null and void. And here a person is prostituted at the age of 13 and 14. So they are children. So when we talk about commercial sexual exploitation, what hits our mind, even to the law enforcers, is that a person has to be, or child has to be trafficked and taken to a brothel or forced into sex, exploited, either as an escort, through escort services or other places. We don't even think about community-based sexual exploitation. So that's why I said, the definition commercial sexual exploitation term is a very generalized. Similarly, sex tourism. It is said that, maximum, many of the places and a lot of sex tourism takes place at the place where sports events are organized. There is a study which says wherever there is going to be a gathering, irrespective of what kind of gathering we have, be it religious, be it sports event, or be it any entertainment business. Super Bowl in USA is considered to be the hub of sex tourism. And when we talk about sex tourism, it is, heaven for the pedophiles. So the chances of children being trafficked there is huge. And similarly, at the place of, tourism, tourist destinations, like being in, Bangkok, or be it here in Thailand, in many of the, I would say that islands, or be it Kerala, or be it Goa. So these are the places where are the fair chances that a child is being exploited. So sex tourism again is a huge problem in commercial sexual exploitation, and particularly children are being exploited. Now, bride trafficking again is a concept which people don't even talk about. Forced marriages, we have been hearing, in Hyderabad, the sheikhs would come and take the girls, small girls, and marry them and take them, and then they are being exploited in Gulf countries. But even domestically, there is a lot of happening, bride trafficking. So girls from tribal places are being married to the communities where there is a huge skewed sex ratio. People are being brought. There is a concept of molki or paro in Mewati region, and the girls are being bought from all corners of the country. It doesn't matter what caste, class, or region or religion they come from. So this is bride trafficking again is a huge problem which is growing, but people don't even know about it or don't even talk about it. Now, pornography. Pornography is a huge problem now, and particularly after the COVID. In COVID, what happened is skin-to-skin contact, which is basic form of commercial sexual exploitation, got missing. So when that got missing, the skin-to-skin contact was gone, then pornography, it became a huge business. And they say, many lakhs of pornographic sites started during the COVID period. And the worst part about pornography is, everybody who is seeing a pornographic site would feel that the person who is doing it, who is acting there, is happily doing it. But there is a study which says there is a huge number of these actors are forced into it, and particularly in child pornography. It's a very, very common form of exploitation, and it is huge. Most of the countries would they have banned it, prohibited, you can't see that, and it's an offense. But you can go to the dark web and people just go and see that. And similarly in entertainment business. Entertainment business, when there was a bar dance girls, they used to go, many of the bar dance girls were from Bedia Bashra community going from here. And very young girls used to go and get exploited there. So the idea of giving you this bouquet of so-called, different kinds of commercial sexual exploitation is just to let you know that if at all you get a victim in your hospital, for the doctors in particular, I'm telling. So, you have to understand that there could be many forms of commercial sexual exploitation. And it is just not a case of rape. Every case, a sexual exploitation is not just a case of rape. Of course, 376 would be applied. But is it a case of trafficking or not? This is one thing that doctors can easily discern. Because you get close to the victim, You are going to talk to them. You can have that, develop that trust, because between the police and the victim, there is always a trust deficit. So that is what you can bridge, and you can figure out if at all it's a case of trafficking, or is it a case of, simple rape case, and also knowing that, what sort of sex trafficking a victim has been, they have suffered. So this is one about commercial sexual exploitation. Similarly, let us understand forced labor. So when we talk about forced labor, agriculture, we just miss it out. Now, a study says 60% of child labor is in agriculture sector. But nobody talks about it. Just because most of the time when you see children working in the field, you find them with parents. But you're not even knowing that even the parents have been trafficked. Is it like, they have been forced into labor in agriculture? Is it a bonded laborage or what? So, and even the children are not paid at all. So agriculture sector is again a place where a lot of child trafficking happens. And so now another big problem in metros is domestic help. Now, I remember that when I came to Delhi for the first time, even I was offered many of the domestic help, you can get a 14-year-old girl, 13, 14, 15-year-old girl. Unfortunately, the domestic help that you get is mostly the girls, not the males. If you go to the placement agency, hardly you're going to find a placement agency who are going to offer you the services of male domestic help. So these girls who are coming, they are trafficked, recruited and brought to the placement agencies, which is happening in a big way. And even they are victimized by the employers. Let me give a simple case, we put into the definition of human trafficking. So how a domestic help can be seen as a human trafficking case? The freedom of movement is totally curtailed. I remember that once when I visited somebody when I had just come to Delhi and rang the bell. So the person who was to whom I was visiting, so they were not there. So that girl who was there as a domestic help, she was somewhere from the window and said that, who are you? I told them I've come to visit whatever, the person. So she said, okay, they are not here. So let me call them and ask them, and then only I will let you in. I said, okay. So I could understand there was a security concern. But she called and then she opened the door. I went in. I said, you could have opened. She said, no, the security issue is there in Delhi, so we don't open it. We have been, I've been told not to open the gates. I said that it makes sense. But because I was already working on human trafficking, so I have a compulsive, I would say that a problem of starting discussing, start discussing with the, particularly domestic helps and other people, what they have gone through over a period of time. So you won't believe she told me that she was in a place earlier before coming to this place where she was offered just 2 roti and moong ki dal twice a day. That's it for food. And she was asked to sleep just on the floor. And in the name of the mat, she had nothing but, I would say that newspapers. This becomes a case of trafficking. If you just fit that in the definition, you will see how the exploitation happens, because the deception and fraud is there. Exploitation is there. In domestic help, what happens is what they have been promised while being recruited, recruitment is not, taken care of. So that becomes a case of fraud and deception. The payment they have promised, that is not paid to them. Because what you pay is more to the placement agencies than directly to them. Even the placement agencies would ask, you better pay them direct, rather than paying directly into the account of the domestic help. So there are cases of, this is what is, this thing, a case of human trafficking. Believe me, just 7-8 months back, maybe a year back, so we were looking for a domestic help. So we, for the first time in these 8-9 years staying in Delhi, so we asked the placement agency through a police station to, send a girl for domestic help. She came here, and after serving for 1 month, and we said, okay, give you an account and we'll pay you. She said, no, I have been asked that you have to pay to the placement agency. Then something struck us, and I was there, and I was on a visit from Bhopal. So I asked her, okay, do you know that how much we are paying? She said, no, I don't know, because I have never asked the placement agency. My sister-in-law knows, who stays in the village. I said, tell me, like, honestly, what has your sister-in-law told you that, like, how much are you being paid? She said 9,000 rupees. And we were paying 16,000 rupees that time. So I said, like, why don't you open an account? She said, if I open an account, then I won't get, like, the placement agency is going to somehow register a case against me, get a case registered against me in police station. And for what? She said, I don't know. This becomes a case of human trafficking. You just communicate with them with the domestic help, and you will realize, I'm telling you, not just like as a doctor, you have to do it, but as a common citizen, you just talk to them and you will realize how much they are being exploited. We know what bonded labor, debt labor is. I don't need to explain that. Begging, again, there is a conflict going on. One school of thought says that, like, begging is it's because of the status, the poverty of some people, and some say that it is like, they are recruited and they're being exploited by organized. It's an organized crime and by syndicates, and both is true. So you will find many children who are being exploited in begging also. And then small businesses, we understand. But we never talk about child soldiers. If at all we talk about child soldiers, what hits our mind again is Boko Haram in Africa. Because you have seen many videos, the BBC has been, like, publicizing it. And you think, okay, the child soldiers are in Africa only, they are recruited and they are basically being exploited. No, you go to the next slide areas and see. So there are two kinds of, for two purposes, they are recruited by the insurgents, basically. One, as combatants, and second is as non-combatants. Combatants are those who have been given arms and they are asked to come and fight from the front. Non-combatants is one area where children are recruited most of the time. Very few combatants would be there, and children are used as combatants just because they can become a shield, because the law enforcement won't force them or take any action or won't use force on children, because the human rights issue is a big problem. So that is why they are used as human shield, as we used to see in, like, in Jammu and Kashmir. So, when one DIG interviewed some children there, they said, if we do not become the frontliners, then we are abused. We are hit by them and, physically abused. And if we just become the frontliners, then we are paid 100 rupees. So it is better to get 100 rupees rather than, like, being abused physically. This is a case of human trafficking. What you need to do is just put it in the the checklist that I have, which I showed you in the beginning. So it's a simple case of human trafficking. So child soldiers, again, in India are, like, they are being recruited and they are being used. But we hardly take cognizance of that. So we need to understand. Now, when we come to medical trafficking, this is a huge area, and particularly the doctors need to understand that. Like, organ transplant is one thing everybody knows, as we talk about organ harvesting. And for organ harvesting, like, people are recruited, and children again are being recruited for, organ transplant. So organ harvesting is there. Poverty could be one of the reasons, but again, I don't know how much truth is there that you doctors can tell me, like, but there is some, there was a discussion going on after COVID, that as most of the patients were, even after COVID, after that their death, that their children or their kith and kins were not ready to take the body. So many organs were removed by, from the victims. I don't say that the doctors are doing it, but there are black sheeps here. If at all it has been discussed, then certainly there must have been some cases coming to fore. There, so as we know that kidney is one thing which is required a lot, but at the same time, latest area of trafficking which was being discussed somewhere was about the skin grafting as well. So this is again internationally it has been discussed as one form of organ transplant. Because we always used to think about organ transplants means either the kidney, liver, or other things. But even the skin grafting is one thing which is being discussed. Now let us talk about surrogacy. Surrogacy, that international surrogacy was banned here in India, and it was banned after there were not many cases. Let me give an example. Like when I was CEO CARA, Central Adoption Resource Authority, there a case, somebody from Australia, I think a journalist approached me and said, there is a case where Australian parents had hired a surrogate mother here, a womb, and they had a contract, but rather than having a single child, they got a twin. So, but the Australian parents said, no, we have a contract only for one child. So they left the other child. So that child was left out. The mother was not in a position to take care. So the child was placed in childcare institutions. So this type of exploitation happens. Now, another case of surrogacy, which is very interesting case, and I would say that it's a very gruesome case, is that, as you know, that most of the tea gardens in Darjeeling and in neighboring areas are closing. So, but these people who have migrated there, they are still dependent on the tea garden owners. So in one case, somebody from Calcutta or some around there, they contacted the owner and said because we are unable to have a baby, so we would like to have a surrogate mother. The owner took a lady, a good lady, a healthy lady from who was working there, sort of bonded laborer, and she was brought to Calcutta, and she was inseminated with whatever, and she became a surrogate mother. So she carried the child. When she said that I want to eat something because of the craving, these parents said that the real biological so-called parents or whatever we call them. So they said, no, our doctor has denied that you cannot eat this. And because she was coming from a very rural background. So she said my mother and my parents and everybody, my grandma used to give my mother these things when she was pregnant. So this is good for health. So they said, no, the doctor has refused. So you're not going to be getting anything. So she was denied all the food that she asked for. Finally, she gave birth, and she was not allowed to move out of the house for 9 months. She was totally confined. Freedom of movement was curtailed. In fact, we can say that she was caged. And when she delivered the baby, the parents did not even allow her to see the face of the baby. And she was sent back forcefully, saying that if at all you see the face of the baby, then you are going to develop some relationship or some love. And any day you will come back. It's a pure case of human trafficking. And these things are happening. Believe me, these things are happening and happening in our country. And many a times we just, ignore that. So surrogacy again is one form of human trafficking which happens. Clinical drug trial. This is one thing, which was big. I mean, I would say that when I went to speak in Toronto and other places in US, so they said how can clinical drug trial become a case of human trafficking? So we know how clinical drug trial happens because most of you are doctors. So the subject should know that they are the subject of clinical drug trials. There have been many cases where the subject is not even told that they are subject of clinical drug trials. Most of the subjects come from very, very poor background, or they are illiterate. Only the thumb impression is taken. because there was a case investigated in Madhya Pradesh and doctors were from Indore. If at all here they are from Indore, so they would be knowing it. And the same thing I talked when I was addressing in GB Pant hospital when I was Kara CEO also. Many of the, even a pediatrician doctor was looking after the children, and they were subject of clinical drug trial, and they died. And when they died, autopsy was not done, and it was declared as a natural or normal death, because there is a huge compensation which has to be given. And the patients were not given a single penny. Only thing which the patients were told or given was that free bed, and told that you are going to get free medicine, and they were more than happy, believing that the doctor is gone. Now you just take this condition where the subject is not knowing that they are subject of clinical drug trial, and they are exploited because their life is in danger. Put it again in the definition of human trafficking in that checklist, and you will see that it's a case of human trafficking. So we have to go beyond the conventional definition of human trafficking and understand it is only possible if you have that checklist. Now again, in the case of adoption trafficking. Now adoption trafficking, what happens is again, there was a debate if trafficking can happen in adoption. I remember when I was in Geneva and, in a UN conference. So when I talked about adoption trafficking, so there was a lot of UN crime. And somebody came running and said that, okay, why do you want to, club these two words, adoption and trafficking? Because adoption is a very pious thing. And exactly the same thing happened when I was in Delhi and talking about adoption trafficking. Adoption trafficking happens when, it doesn't happen through the legal means. There are only two ways that a child can be adopted. One is through HAMA, Hindu Adoption Maintenance Act. When the two, Hindu parents, one is the giver, the other one is receiver. They go under a contract, and then they decide, to give, the giver gives the child to the receiver, and there is no exchange of money. And they go to a registrar office and sign a bond. And the other way is CARA, Central Adoption Resource Authority. Under Juvenile Justice Act, there is a procedure and a whole process through which you can adopt. Now, what has been happening is, you can again correct me if I'm wrong, but that is what my study has said. And it has come through many of the doctors, have shared that, saying that we have not been party to that, but of course, these things happen. Is like straight from hospitals when the child is born, and if suppose there is an unwed mother and she doesn't want to keep the child, then the child is born in the hospital, and somebody is wanting to have a child and going through IVF, and still it is not a successful thing. So the child born in the hospital is handed over to that IVF parents, and they are registered as biological parents. Now, when I was talking to some doctors, they said it's a win-win situation. The mother doesn't want to keep the child, she's unwed. And these parents were very much interested in having the child. So they have got the child. So both are happy, and the child is going to be happy. Then I told them, let me tell you one story. In Katni in 2012-13, I'm talking about 2012 and 13, there was a child who was similarly taken from a hospital in Katni. The police somehow they were tipped off, and they intervened and arrested that person who had taken the child. You know who the parents were? The parents were from Bachla community. As I told you, Bedia and Bachla community are traditionally into intergenerational prostitution. And the same year in 2012, this happened perhaps in 2012 or 13, which I mentioned in my book, that sir was mentioning about combating human trafficking gaps in policy and law. So in that Bachla community, in 2012, more than 80 children were rescued from Mandsaur and Ratlam area. And these children were brought from outside in this community, because traditionally they normally prostitute their own children, the children from their own community. But in Bachla community, these 80 plus children in some of these villages, because these were the only villages which were raided. So the children were either kidnapped or taken through adoption from the hospitals the way that I have put. And here they were injected with some hormones so that the girl grows fast, so that rather than waiting till they get into 13 and 14, they can be prostituted at 9 or 10 years. So now tell me that if at all, if you go through the formal process of adoption, then what happens is the parents, home study report is done. They are checked if they are eligible and suitable. There are two conditions. They have to be eligible as well as suitable to adopt their child. But would the doctor be doing that? No. They would just see, the face of the person who is coming to you and asking that, okay, you take care of the child. And prima facie, if you feel that it is good, you would give them informally, thinking that you are doing the right thing. And many a times the children are sold. So adoption trafficking does happen, believe me, and it is happening in numbers, in N numbers. And only this here, adoption trafficking, clinical trials, surrogacy, these all are the places where, particularly in medical trafficking cases, where doctors have a very, very important, in fact, they are the victim. They are the main persons who can combat this and stop that. So here your role becomes very, very important. Besides, even while we are talking about other things. Now, let us understand the gravity of this, situation. If you go to the data, the data says, ILO says, as per the 2017, 89 million people were victimized. But very interesting thing is, it says that out of 1,000 persons, children, 4.4 children are victims of human trafficking. I'm again repeating that out of 1,000 children, 4.4 children are victims of human trafficking. Now, where do we get the data of India? We get it from NCR, National Crime Record, depending on how many cases have been registered in, police stations. As per the 2020 report, 4,709 persons were only the victims. Only 4,709 victims were there in this country in 2020. And out of that, only 2,222 children were victims. Can you believe that only 2,222 are victims in this whole country, such a big, huge country? And only 845 girls were victims. So here is that gap. And what does the data say? It says 70% of the victims of human trafficking are either women or children. So how do we explain this? How do we explain the huge gap? Because when I say 1,000 to 1,000, 4.4 children are victims, then what is the population of this country? Right now it is 142 crore. So if you just use this, statistics, 1,000 to 4.4, so you should get around 75 lakh around what we call it victims. And what victims do we have according to the data? 4,709. Can you even see, can you bridge that gap? So it is just because we do not know what human trafficking is. That's why I said you need to know first what human trafficking is. Otherwise, we will never be able to bridge this gap or do that. And how do we say that, what are the reasons? One is because non-registration, the second is non-reporting. So non-reporting is a major problem. That is because there is a trust deficit between the police and the victims. They won't like to come. Second is stigma and ignorance. They are ignorant that, most of the time the victims of the human trafficking do not know that they're being victimized. In bonded laborers, they won't. If you ask a bonded laborer, why are you not coming out? You know what they are going to say? मेरे दादा परदादा भी इन्हीं की सेवा करते थे, तो मेरा भी फर्ज है कि मैं इन्हीं की सेवा करूं. It's a very, very normal statement coming from a bonded laborer. For generations, they have been bonded. So this is ignorance. And particularly in sex trafficking or in other cases, wherever there is money is involved, stigma is a big thing. They won't like to come out. Then psychologically, they are intimidated, and even physically they are intimidated by the traffickers. And now is the latest trend is digital space. This is one thing that you have to understand, because each one of us are in that stage where either we are having our children, young ones, or otherwise we are having, like, who are very senior, could be having their grandchildren here. A latest case, which is again, which gives goosebumps and at the same time sets an alarm. There was a case in UP where total trafficking happened. If you go by the definition, what was that? OTD, as we called it in the MP model. The action can be divided as OTD, origin, transit, and destination. Origin is a place where they are recruited. Transit is they are transferred, and D is the destination where the person is received and maintained. So what happened here? A girl was recruited from the place of origin, that was a village, because she showed her desperation. So if you ask me in one line, what is trafficking? I say trafficking is nothing but exploitation of vulnerability of the person. And whose vulnerability? The person who is desperate, who shows their vulnerability, who exposes their vulnerability. So how do they expose? They say that we are unhappy, we are not doing very well. So, and digital space is now where everyone wants to share what they think about. So what happened here? The girl said that, okay, I'm not getting what I want in the village. I'm desperate. I want to move out. Somebody from Delhi said, okay, we are going to recruit you. We are going to give you a very good job. Don't worry. That was, we call it grooming. Grooming is not in digital space. If somebody is recruiting, we call it grooming. Grooming most of the time is used for, like, sexual grooming, but grooming can be used for other purposes as well. So the person was groomed and said, okay, we are going to give you a job in Delhi. Faceless. The girl was told that, okay, we are sending you a ticket online. This is the train that you have to board. The girl took the ticket. She came in auto, sat in the train. Food was served in the train, faceless. The person reached Paharganj station, that girl. They said, you have a hotel room booked, faceless, and auto is waiting outside. Just go sit there. They will take you to the hotel. She went to the hotel, stayed in the night. Next day morning, they said, again, an auto is coming. You come to our office and here is your job. She came and she landed up in a brothel. And nowhere there was a face anymore. So the faceless trafficking is the biggest threat which is happening now in digital space. So everybody needs to know that. You have to tell your children, you have to tell people when you're talking to them. So don't believe in what is coming across or what is coming to you through the digital space. So now there is always a confusion that if it is a problem of criminal justice system or social justice system, and I say it's a problem of, the criminal justice system. So how do we how can we address this problem or combat this system? One is, it is required that everyone should know what human trafficking is, at least the basic minimum. Like as we are discussing today, this is what I call as conceptual literacy. I use this model CCS. So conceptual literacy, at least everyone should know about what human trafficking is, basic literacy of human trafficking. And particularly the people who are interventionists, like the people who are in criminal justice system, the law enforcers in criminal justice system, or other stakeholders in criminal justice system, and the social justice system people, like who are in Women and Child Development Ministry or other places, or the NGO people who directly act. They have to have conceptual clarity. There is a huge difference between conceptual literacy and conceptual clarity. When we talk about conceptual clarity, then we need to differentiate between different kinds of and dimensions of human trafficking, and then go further deep and further classify it and learn everything about it. So that is what conceptual clarity is. And then you have to develop a skill set to combat trafficking. This is the only way now that we can address or combat human trafficking. And you also at least spread awareness about human trafficking. This conceptual literacy is very, very important for all doctors. And now, just if I have to explain how the traffickers normally would recruit, that's a model I use, that is CARE model. One is the traffickers. Normally, it is an organized crime. The same person is not going to maintain the person, and the same person is not going to be recruiting the person. So they have a whole network. So it's an organized crime. So there would be a person at the place who scout and spot the victims. And whom do they scout and spot? The people who are exposing their vulnerability. They will scout and spot them, then convince them, okay, whatever situation you are in, you deserve a better place. And then allure them that there is something better already waiting for you. Just come, and they would recruit and exploit them. So this is normally is the model that is used. So there are basically 4 ways which UN has accepted to combat trafficking, that is prevention, prosecution, and protection. So prevention is what is very, very important for us, because if a victim is trafficked once, normally what the police officers would do, even to you, because you are doctors, they will come and say that, okay, can you give us MLC? So we are concerned more about MLC, that is the physical, harm done to them, physical injury which is happening. But in case of human trafficking, more than the physical injury, it is the psychological damage. And in the current situation or the system that is there, we don't have proper systems in place where we take care of or we try to repair their psychological damage. So that is why it is very important that we prevent people from getting victimized. So prevention is very, very important. And when we talk about prevention, it is not the law enforcement agencies or the criminal justice system's role. It is the social justice system's role, where you also become a part of social justice system. Similarly, prosecution and protection. So what we need to create is a social security support network, and everyone has to play their role in doing this. So as I told you, psychological damage is most important. So thank you. This is what I wanted to bring forth and discuss with you, so that I can discuss more through questions if at all you have any doubts. So
Viren, can you stop sharing screen, and then we'll have few minutes of discussion and question answering before we leave.
That is what is interesting, because just give me a second. I don't know, how to stop sharing.
That's on the top. If you're using an Apple, that's on the top. Green button. And then you're doing...
You touch the screen and it will come up. Stop sharing.
Okay, yes. Not sharing. Stop share.
Yeah.
It's done?
Yeah. So there are no questions really in the chat box, but
I'd like to
would ask the president and other people to share the questions, and then I have something peculiar to share with Viren, which I had heard about 30 years back. Yes, ma'am. Please go on.
Yeah, actually, very, very well put. And, I think every slide of yours has taught me and put me to think, because I really didn't know many things which you could call as exploitation. But certain things, I was just wondering, is all surrogacy, trafficking, or what, clinical drug trial is going to happen in the proper way? Similarly, surrogacy does happen, but I'm not sure if any surrogacy is considered good. I know clinical drug trials have to happen, otherwise you won't get drugs into the market. I can't just do it on dogs and say that this is going to be. So, where is the line that you could draw? You had said about the unwed mother, where the child is being taken away, given to some other parents and all. I have seen this happening right in front of my eyes in our department, where they would be orphans, in government hospitals. And then my senior had got into this, so people would just call from private nursing homes with good intentions and all. Though we did put down our foot after one that she did, the rest of the department put down the foot, as we said we would. But that was, say, 30-35 years ago. And I'm very surprised that with CARA in place, 2012 is pretty recent. It is still happening. That is information to me. But in surrogacy, in clinical drug trial, where do you draw the line? Because organ transplantation, now it has become very strict with SOTOs in place. But I'm not sure about the surrogacy and the drug trial? Where is the line that you draw?
One thing is, if you follow the rules, it is not a case of human trafficking.
Okay.
The moment you start violating the rules and for your vested interest, and you start doing it, and there is an element of exploitation there. Because the moment you break the rule, if you're trying to take a shortcut, so certainly there would be a vested interest, involved in that. So the moment the vested interest comes to you, it is for your own interest, and the loss would be, and you put, basically at stake the life of, or jeopardize the life of the victims. So it becomes
Okay,
a
so
case.
clinical drug trial, you mean to say the rules are there and you follow the rules?
Exactly. I
follow
mean,
every bit
clinical
of
drug trial is not at all human trafficking. I said
Yeah.
the moment when you compromise, as I said, the subject is not knowing that they are victims of human clinical drug trial.
Okay.
You just take angutha. उस केस में क्या हुआ था कि जहाँ पे हुआ था.
समझाया नहीं, समझाया.
All the patients were, most of the patients were rickshaw pullers. And when during the investigation they were asked, they said we were not knowing that we are subject of clinical drug trials. They said कि डॉक्टर साहब ने बोला था कि तुमको दवाई फ्री में दे. उसी में खुश थे, वो बोलते थे वो तो भगवान है हमारे. And many of them died because of that.
I know of a lot of what I call as political academicians or doctors in Delhi who earn huge amount of money from clinical trials, who have no background really to do how clinical trials to be done, and they're doing all kind of nonsense. I know them personally, but you can't probably do much about it. And most of the stories which Viren has told about domestic helps and the agencies and all that, I have actually witnessed and even gone into the details. Now, most of the agency fellows I kind of dealt with eventually came to know was history sheeters. Many of them were actually out on bail from Tihar and all that, and you had used some woman front so as to do the negotiations. But once in a month, they wanted that girl to be brought to them for their own sexual needs, and they will make stories. And of course, in my case, I made sure that I start their accounts and things like that. But then those girls won't stay long with you. I mean, they would disappear one reason or the other. You can't kind of think of that. You keep this child, groom her, educate her, keep her for next 10 years and make sure that she has a new life. They just disappear after a few. I mean, they vanish. So I had requested Dr. Shabina Ahmed, who's from Northern from Assam, and she's done a lot of work on this. I know this trafficking, and I thought maybe she would like to say a few words. Shabina ma'am joined on my request. Ma'am, are you there?
Yeah.
I heard you in the conferences, so I wanted you to speak. And I will take last 1 or 2 minutes to tell one of the things which I came to know, which was very shocking.
First of all, I think I must thank Mr. Virendra for your wonderful talk. And it has been a real eye-opener to look beyond labels, to look beyond what you see and what is undercover. And I love those words, conceptual literacy and what was the other one? Conceptual, conceptual clarity. And this is what you really brought forward. I'm not really working with trafficking, but I have been following what is going on in Assam. And now this bride commercial exchange for bride. So bride trafficking is very much, I think, which is going on here. This is one. And another thing is social media sort of falling into the net. This is another thing because as Mr. Virendra has said, that it's the vulnerability. It's the vulnerability of our region that's exposing that and taking advantage of this. It's been so these are generally, but we generally, when we think of commercial, we always think of brothels, but of course you have really opened our eyes, and we can really look into when the domestic help comes, then we must really know how things are. So thank you very much. I don't have much to say, but what I want to say is I want to thank the ICNCL group for really bringing you here and opening our minds. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind words.
Viren, I wish to share something which I had heard about 30 years back. I had just joined back CMC Ludhiana, and suddenly we realized we doctors are, feel lonely and dejected and all that. So CMC Ludhiana administration came with the idea of making groups. So there were people from within the hospital and there were people from outside the community. So our group, we were about 4 or 5 people. And one of the gentlemen who was there was from army background. Now, he told me something which after hearing, I couldn't sleep for about 3 or 4 days. Trust me. The story was that in UP, and I will find details and literature and pass it on to you if I could lay a hand on it, that in summers in the interiors of UP, the parents who are poor, they will play a trick which was known to almost the entire area, almost every family. They will say, we will walk towards Ayodhya, to see Ram Baba. What happened, Ram Lala, when they used to go to see, Andhi chalti thi, loo chalti thi, and the families also knew what's going to be the outcome. They will stop at night somewhere in a desolate place and the girls will go missing. So this was the period of 15-20 days when all those traffickers would come. They know that the parents actually want to get these kids off their back because they are poor. These girls, they can't pay the dowry off. This 14-15-year-old girls will be abducted. And it was kind of collusion between the parents and the people who will do it. And these girls then will be sent to the brothels of all major cities. And when these parents will eventually reach the village, obviously the village knew this story had happened in almost every family, and they will say, वो बेटी का नाम लेके वो राम लाला को प्यारी हो गई, राम लाला को प्यारी हो गई. And with this kind of religious camouflage, this human trafficking was so acceptable in those interior villages of UP. I was shocked when I heard it. I had a daughter a few years old at that given time, and I would give my life for her. I mean, I loved her so much. And when I heard this story, it really shook me up. And I'm sure that very senior man, he retired at a very, very senior post in army, wouldn't be telling me a lie. I will look into my documents, records, and maybe because I had asked him to give me some proof of the same, and he did pass on something to me. Shocking, how people can be so cold and so calculative. I mean, I can understand the desperation, but to lose their own children, and there's a social acceptability to the same. That is the worst. Like the same way as you were saying that there are generations of prostitute that they will insist the mothers would put their girls into the prostitution themselves at the age of 13, 14. I mean, something we thought we have evolved from animals into human beings over thousands and thousands of years, and here we are, worse than animals, And
I'm here, what you said, sir, just because I want to tell you a bit about my work. It won't take more than a minute. I'm working with Bedia community. And right now we are working in 60 villages with more than 5,500 children of Bedia. And this also happened, accidentally. I landed up in a village of this intergenerational prostitution. And I was surprised to see a 14-year-old girl into prostitution. I was so shocked. And that was the turning point in my life. That has totally changed me and it made me work more. So, and the first girl whom we rescued, and she would have been into prostitution. She was 12, 13-year-old girl, and her mother was trying to prostitute her. And somehow, I don't say that she rescued, she always wanted to study, and we brought her to Bhopal with many more children. And they say she appeared in UPSC interview. So, and she did a BTech and MTech. And right now we have more than 70, we have around 75 children here in Bhopal. So we can bring changes, we can be the change agents, So as I, that is why I was telling everyone, it is not just as the doctors that you have to, play a role. I mean, you are a citizen of this country. I'm not doing the work as a police officer there. And it's a team now, and it's expanding. I mean, you just go to these villages and see these children are change agents now. They say that, okay, we don't want to get into this. They fight against their mothers and say that, no, we want to study, we want to go outside, because we have shown them the world. And we were never moralistic there. We said, let us give them opportunities and give them options. Then let them decide. And you will find that if you give opportunities and options, they do wonders. And this is what the role we have to play. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Viren.
Yes.
You have said beautiful things. I have screenshots of your slides to go through them all over again. It is fantastic, and probably we'll have some YouTube recording also coming in. We'll share the link to you. It was so good to have you. So we are waiting to have you back on this session again to hear about Kara and the kind of great jobs, great work that you've done there too. Fantastic. So all I want is that I'm going to pay your fees to make you a member. You don't need to pay me that. No issues.
Thank you so much.
That's your honorarium for this talk. So you be our member. and you'll be
Like,
there.
Salim sir, अगर हमको बोले कि पे कर रहे तो मुझे तो लगता है बड़ा भाई दे रहा है, मजा है.
You and your wife has always treated me like a family. I honor you guys.
Sir, not treated you. You are a family.
So, Dr. Sareen, I should say you were pretty late in getting him to this group in the webinar, huh? I must say that. You should have got
ये
him
मैं
much
अभी
earlier.
इलेक्शन का टाइम है एंड थोड़ा सा ज्यादा बिजी चल रहा है, बट इनकी बात हम नहीं टाल सकते. दिक्कत ये है हमारे साथ. ये जैसे जो इन्होंने कह दिया तो फिर मैं टाल नहीं सकता उसको. दैट्स व्हाई आई सेड ज्यादा मैंने कुछ पूछा
Thank
भी
you
नहीं.
so much, sir. We really,
वन पार्टिसिपेंट से बताइए. I didn't even
as
ask him.
Dr. Sabina said, it has been an eye-opener for all of us who claim to be working in this area a little bit, and others are not even working in this area a little bit. So it will be too much for them. So thanks a lot. I think, Dr. Sareen, you'll have to give an official vote of thanks. And
Yeah, so I must thank IAP to give us this platform first, and then Samir, who's missing, he had to attend some another meeting. He's done a wonderful job to arrange all these meetings. You all, and I call him Viren, so I'll keep addressing him as Viren. Fantastic job. Thank you so much. Very good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
thanks a lot.